Yes. From Bari, Italy, we went up to Foggia, and um, in Foggia, it was kind of a high hill, but it's still a mud hole. And we finally got all our equipment together, and we had some big. And now we're finally in tents. There's about, let's see, 6 to every tent, and there was only supposed to be 4, but there were 6 of us to every tent. And it's winter time, and we had to get a lot of copper wire because we'd have a big tank outside full of 100 octane gas, and it would. We had a stove in the stove was a some kind of a steel tank. It's only about like a 10 or 12 gallon, and then at the bottom of that we would put a hot plate, a piece of heavy steel, and then we had a spigot, and it would be let the 100 octane hit that hot plate, and then it would sort of catch a fire, and then we had, for the vent, we had 105 shells, and they were nice because they were about 2 foot long, and then 6 inches. Every 6 inches they would be narrowed down to about, instead of 4 inches, they'd be about 3 inches, and so we'd cut off the end of it, and we slipped them together, and we made a chimney out of them. So that was our chimney, and that'd go to the top of our tent. Plus, it was very dangerous, but it worked out, and I think there was only one fire that ever happened, so it wasn't too bad. But the copper tubing was hard to come by. That was the hardest thing we could find, and then we had to find what was happening is our captain ran the supply room. He was pretty good, and what he'd do, he'd go and make requisitions for different things, but the copper lines and the valves were hard to find. So he'd make up some fake stuff, and he'd get them out of the supply plate bill. And it worked out pretty good. You know, every tent had a 100-gallon tank outside, and it would drip down, and you could get it pretty hot. The pipes would get pretty hot in there too. I was always worried about fires. But most of the nights we had enough clothing, so we'd just about turn it off. It barely stay on, or it turned off, either one. So we're very careful with that. And we were right next to a lake. This lake, every afternoon around just before dark, here comes the geese. They come flying in there, and it gets pretty low right over our place. And what we would do, he said, let's go out there and see if we can get some geese. So we had machine guns, we had our rifles, we had pistols, everything. There was about 6 or 8 of us. So when these geese came over in a flock like that, we'd start shooting at them. There's feathers all over the sky. Do you know that we not brought one of those geese down? Man, was we mad. So we gave up on that. But what we really did, and that was with the belly tank cartons, we'd straighten them all out, and we'd make walls, and we had bunks in there. I mean, we used them things. And we had roofs made out of them and everything. And then we got out of these tanks. I mean, the tents. We got out of the tents, and that helped. And then we even put a building up. We have a clubhouse. We'd have wine and beer, and I guess some guys did requisition whiskey, but I don't know much about that because I didn't care for it anyway, so I didn't pay much attention to it. But we had some gay times in them buildings. The building to live in is quite nice. And then one of the buildings we had, it caught a fire and burned down, so we had to rebuild it. And then we had these Italian guys, you know, they're willing to help us. They'd help building, they'd put walls up and everything, concrete guys, you know, they did a lot of work for us. Some would cut your hair, some would cook for you. They did a lot of things. They're very helpful. So one of the guys I got to know pretty well, and he says, you're going to to Rome? Yeah, I said, my brother's coming, and we're going to go to Rome. He says, I've been gone 3 years, and he says, I've never seen my sister, and she's a nun in this convent and all that. And he says, would you look her up? I said, sure. And so it was a funny thing. We got in this nunnery, and it's a little old house, a little old building and all that, and it was pretty nice. And it must have been a store or something like that, and they converted it. So I says, I got to take a picture for your brother, And she's, and that was it was on the second floor, and I'm ready. He said, well, I got to get back for it. And Walt was there. I said, I'll go out this and jump on that concrete pad and take it in. The concrete pad was a cistern. It had concrete on top of it, and I went right through it into the water. Here I am, naked in a convent, and they were drying my clothes. Very comical, and I felt pretty bad about that. But I got to see her, and it was a real nice reunion. I had a picture of him, and she gave me a picture of herself, so it was really nice. And one of those little incidents. And my brother and I went out from there. We went to Rome. This was on the way to Rome. It's a little town outside of Naples. But before I got to tell you what happened before. One of the airplanes, Marty lived in Naples. He was in the Air Force too. He was on a C-47. And one of our airplanes blew up on takeoff, and they went in and crashed. He got the pilot out. Well, I'm going to see who he was, see? And when I looked at him, he was naked, and he was all black. And there was crust, and blood was oozing out through the cracks. And, the worst thing I had in my life. So I said, wish I didn't do that. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said a prayer for him. It was terrible. And Marty said, we're not flying anymore. I said, how are we going to get there? And he said, so we got a Jeep somehow. So we recorded the Jeep. So we got to Rome. Rome was pretty nice. We got to see the Pope. We had an audience with the Pope. We kissed his ring. It was pretty nice. He talked to us, and had an audience with the Pope. Pope Pius XII. And he talked to French, Italian, English, and some other language. I don't know. It was pretty nice. And Rome was like living in any big town. The lights were on, everything. There was no problem living there. And the restaurants were open, everything was nice. So, another thing that happened at the airport, here's near the end of the war, what happened is they brought an F-80 fighter jet, and they wouldn't let us get within 100 feet of it. We couldn't touch it, we couldn't do anything. We couldn't believe this. And so we just passed it off as bad management, because it was an insult to us. Here we go through the 3 years of war, and these guys wouldn't even let us next to a new airplane. They had two of them in there too, so it was a bad incident. But let's see, Rome. And then we were on our way one day. B-26 pulls into our airport. So we go over and see what was the problem. And the ambulance pulled up and everything. And they were all shot up. And this guy says, okay, 5 liras for all you viewers. And his muscle out of his whole backside butt side was shot off. He was in bad shape, making jokes. And there's other ones that were shot up too, so they had landed at our place. We were the closest airport. And got them to the hospital. Never know whatever happened to them. And then Eddie Rickenbacker came in and visited us. So it was pretty nice. And he told us about, he had 3 weeks, 21 days, I guess. Or 3 weeks, I think. I don't know. It was something, or 26 days or something like that. Anyway, he told about 4 or 5 jokes, and we didn't get very close to him, but he seemed to be very nice and cordial. So he passed out medals and stuff like that. We all got dressed up in uniforms, and we hadn't been dressed up for so long we didn't know. So that was a nice thing to do.